Alright, so we are on week 10 of the Sincere block. I am behind because of the holidays. I hope everybody had a good holiday. But nevertheless, I'm doing the 9-inch Sincere block. So for the background fabric, I needed one 3.5-inch square and then 8 2 3/4 inch squares in my background, and then my print, which is this lovely dark blue floral pattern, I needed 8 3.5-inch squares. They're already cut out. I basically have them lined up in how this pattern is going to go. So I've drawn lines on the diagonal on all of my background 2 3/4 inch squares. I'm going to start by sewing those on to make those little skinny strips, the B part that you will see. So basically, I'm going to be putting this one in this corner here. And then this one will be going into this corner, lining those edges up. This will be going into this corner. And this one will be going into, let's see, this corner here. So what's going to happen is you're going to sew directly on that line. You're going to cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance, press it out, press to the dark side, and then I'm going to put it back into the focus. What you're trying to do is after you've done this side, then you're going to take your other squares and you're going to place them with the parallel lines. These lines, these two lines here, are going to be parallel to each other, and you're going to put it in the opposite corner over here. So you have this nice skinny little piece of fabric that is going to be your print fabric. So I'm going to sew these, I'm going to press them, and then I'm going to come back to you. Okay, so now I'm back. I have sewn on the line, I've pressed it towards the dark side of my fabrics, I've lined them up again, and I'll be taking my final 4 squares with my lines on it that are already drawn here, and I'll be putting them in the opposite sides, making sure that I have a nice parallel strip of the print fabric. So I'll be putting those nice and evenly in the corners. Like this. I'll be sewing directly on the line, and then I will hold it out and press, cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and those will be the final of the B blocks for our setup. So I'll be back after I have sewn those. Alright, so I am back and I have sewn on my other squares into the other corners, cut to a 1/4 inch, steam to the dark side, and now you can see you have these nice little parallel pieces of your print pointing out. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a Union Jack. So what I'm going to do now is that this is kind of our final squares. This is your B square, C square, and A square. So I'm going to sew across these first, and then I'll fold these down and sew those together. So I'll come back to you when I have these 3 lines sewn together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so I am back. I have sewn 3 strips together, and now I'm going to sew these 2 together and these 2 together. So on the back, these 2 bottom ones are pressed inwards towards the large dark floral print, and then my middle section on the back, my white fabric is pressed towards the dark floral print on either side of them, and that way these 2 seams here and here will lock together really nicely. So hopefully I have a nice straight seam. So I will sew these together, and you will come back to see the finished block. Alright, so this is the final block. It's all sewn together. Basically on the other side, I've actually pressed my seams inward just to, sorry, seem to have some issues with the lighting. I press my seams inward just to make it an easier flat line block. But this is the Sincere block, number 10 for the Sewcialites sew along. And also just a tip for making sure that you get nice crisp points on these ends. If you're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance foot on your machine, I would switch it over back to a regular one that doesn't have that. So that way if you're pinning it, to make sure that you have a nice point, you don't hit the pins and it messes things up. So I like switching in between my 2 feet for those. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will have the next one up hopefully soon.